Hello, everybody. Welcome back to A Manic Odyssey. We continue our wonderful conversations with incredible clinicians. Today, we welcome back a previous guest, Dr. Cindy Nguyen. Hello. Welcome back from the DBT Center of Orange County.
Hi, it's so great to be back. Thank you for your patience, for us having to reschedule. I'm very, very excited to be here. First time was awesome, and I'm looking forward to our second time.
Heck yeah. Yeah. The first time we got to kind of go big picture,
Mhm.
what is DBT? What has it been for you? And this time we're going to lock in on specifically mindfulness and how
Yeah,
mindfulness plays out in the curriculum and how it affects our everyday lives when we're using the skills. So, should we just jump right into the first
let's dive
question?
in. Let's dive in.
Okay.
Yeah, let's
Well,
do it.
Cindy, how would you describe the concept, often called wise mind, in
Yeah.
DBT? And how does that idea relate to a mindfulness practice?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, before I even answer what wise mind in is, I would like to give a definition, a brief definition of what mindfulness is,
Mm,
before we can talk about wise mind. Sorry. So mindfulness is about fully being present in the moment, and aware of your thoughts, your feelings, your sensation, the urges, your surroundings, without judgment. So mindfulness can help you increase awareness, and when you're more aware of what's going inside of you, and also when you're aware of what's occurring outside of you, you are then able to, again, catch those thoughts, catch those emotions, catch those behaviors, and also notice any triggers or patterns that might arise that might not go noticed, right? It also helps you focus on the present, because it teaches you to be in the here and now. It can reduce anxiety and improve your overall sense of well-being. And so you need mindfulness when you are in wise mind. You need to practice mindfulness to get into wise mind. So what is wise mind? Wise mind is this balanced part of our brain. I like to say a wise mind is like the Dumbledore that we all have, or the baby Yoda
yeah.
inside. It's that wisdom, right, that we have, and it combines emotion mind, which is all about emotion, sensation, urges, needs, and wants. And then it also combines the logic mind. So the rational part of our mind, the not black and white thinking, but the thoughts, the facts, the logic that we have. And so wise mind is that fusion of emotional mind and logic mind. And when we are in wise mind, we are able to evoke the Dumbledore out of us. We're able to evoke the wisdom that we have inside of us to make decisions more effectively and just navigate challenges more effectively.
Wow, that's amazing. Would you say that that everybody kind of has a Dumbledore, a Yoda inside of them? It's more just kind of teaching yourself how to start listening to that voice?
100%. Yes. In DBT, we believe that everyone has this inner wisdom, the wise mind inside of them. It may be buried down, deep, deep, deep down, and people may have not had an opportunity to tap into wise mind, but it is in there. And with mindfulness practices, you will be able to, again, get into wise mind and call it out when there are moments of distress, when there are challenges in life. Like wise mind is definitely in everybody.
Yeah. Well, and we're
Yeah.
talking about these three states of mind and how they intertwine with mindfulness. So, would you
Yes.
be able to kind of elaborate on the three states of mind in DBT? Wise mind, emotion mind, and logic mind.
Yes. So wise mind, again, is a concept in DBT where we believe that it's a fusion, right, of reasonable mind or logic mind, and emotion mind. So let's start off with the first state of mind, which is reasonable mind. So this state is all about logic, it's all about facts, all about rationality. So when you're in this state of mind, you're really focused on the objective, and you're really, really making decisions, again, based on facts and logic.
Hmm. Yeah.
I like to say or describe this state of mind as the brain of the brain. Again, you're driven by data. It is task oriented and problem focused.
Yeah.
Whereas the emotion mind, that's more of the heart. That's where you're feeling things. That's where you might have urges. That's when you're making decisions based on your emotions,
Hmm.
what you're wanting out of that moment. It's reactive, it's impulsive. So wise mind again is that fusion of a reasonable mind and emotion mind. And the
Yeah.
thing about with wise mind, it doesn't have to be a clear cut 50% reasonable mind and a 50% emotion mind. So
Yeah.
if you're 90-10 or 80-20, 50-50, 75-25, as long as you're combining components of reasonable mind and also combining emotion mind,
Hmm.
that is mind. So I can give a little example to
Yeah.
kind of walk us through the different states of mind, because when I first learned it, I was like, this all sounds very philosophical. I have no
Yeah.
idea. I have no idea what
Yeah.
this. So I can walk us through an example. So let's say your best friend. Let's say your best friend asks you to loan them a large sum of money.
Okay.
Reasonable mind, you might take this approach very, very logically and very objectively. So you consider factors such as your own financial situation, the amount being asked or requested, right? The likelihood of repayment, not focusing on the relationship, really not focusing that this is your best friend that's asking for support. You're
Yeah.
considering the impact it could have on your friendship if you were to loan them this significant amount of money.
Yeah.
So that's what reasonable mind would look like. Emotion mind, your decision making again is based on emotion. So maybe you feel really guilty or you would feel really anxious saying no. So because that guilt and that anxiety is so intensely high, you're
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm down to give you $1 million, whatever amount it
Yeah.
is, I'm give it to you because I can't sit with that emotion because that anxiety is just not comfortable, right?
Yeah.
You're acting out on emotion mind. Whereas wise mind, you're integrating again both the logic and the emotion. So you could acknowledge the fact that you have empathy for your friend, that it really sucks to be in a position to ask for money. It really sucks that they don't have the financial means to do what they need to do, while also acknowledging your boundaries, while also acknowledging the fact that you might not have the money to give it to them, right?
Yeah.
So you really assess, and you might have an open and honest conversation with your friend about your concerns.
Yeah.
And you might want to set clear boundaries before you give them the money.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for someone like me, like so it's me, Stefan. I have
Right?
strengths that play into emotion mind. I have
Right.
strengths that play into logic mind.
Okay.
And if I can be mindful of those strengths when I pull them together, it's wise mind.
Mhm.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
think because there's pros of being in reasonable mind and also emotion mind. So
Hmm.
if again can pull out factual components, if you can tap into your emotions in certain situations, like
Yeah.
that wise mind. Because there are benefits of being in both reasonable mind and emotion mind, but we want to combine it. We don't want you to be strictly in reasonable mind and strictly in emotion mind. That makes
Yeah. Yeah. In your experience, what are the common factors that pull people into one or the other? Like what kind of pulls us out of wise mind most often?
I think a lot of urges, so emotion mind, a lot of discomforting emotions can definitely pull us out of wise mind. So, for example, let's say you're on a diet and you see a really beautifully crafted cake in front of you, and you're really hungry and you're like, this looks really good. Emotion mind is going to say, damn, go eat that cake because that cake looks really good. It's
Yeah.
lemon flavor, your favorite, and it smells really good. So you're acting out on that urges, right?
Right.
Whereas mind might be like, I have diabetes right now. My
Mm.
ECP told me I need to limit the amount of sugar intake that
Mm.
I have at this moment. So that would be wise mind, right? But
Yeah.
emotion mind is because everything you're acting on emotions, that could definitely be a barrier
Yeah.
of getting wise mind.
Yeah, and what I'm not hearing in that description are judgments. I'm not hearing you say, "You're fat, you don't get a cake."
Uh,
No, you're
yeah.
saying, "No, the facts are, this is my
Mhm.
medical condition currently,
Mhm.
and if I'm being, if I'm gonna act towards a life worth living, I'm gonna act within my values, then I want to live a long and healthy life. I probably can't eat the cake right now." So I'm not hearing any judgmental language when you're talking about this.
No, mindfulness is all about staying in the moment and refraining from judgments. Yeah, no
Mm.
judgments. Trying to refrain from it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
why is that so important? Why is that such an important aspect of the mindfulness process?
Yeah, because when we're judging ourselves, most likely it's going to lead to uncomfortable emotions. feeling shame, feeling guilt. And when we're feeling guilty or feeling shameful, we can't do activities that might be leading to our life worth living goals effectively because we're marinated in that shame and guilt. And
Mm,
so when we're being mindful, again, it's staying in the moment. So if we're criticizing ourselves, we're essentially holding on to that thought and not letting go of it.
mm,
We're shit, I ate that cake and I should have not eaten that cake,
mm.
right? You continue to hold on to that thought. You're not being mindful. You're holding on to a thought that just happened, that really occurred. And mindfulness is really about being in the moment of what's occurring inside of you and outside of you without the judgment. Because if, again, if you hold on to it, that unhelpful statement, it's going to lead to worse emotions that's going to make you feel unpleasant.
Yeah, so I can see how that would play into like compulsive behaviors, whether that's spending,
Yeah.
consumption, whatever it may be,
Mhm.
because you're saying that the judgment is almost like a what's the word? Like a self-propelling wheel. Like once it starts going, it kind of gets some momentum on its own. It's very difficult to then come back out of that judgment.
Mhm. We're
Okay.
sometimes our worst critic, and so one judgment can lead to another, and it starts spiraling down. So with mindfulness, the idea is not ideally we would want to change the judgment, and in DBT, it's more of like acknowledging that the judgment is there,
Hmm.
acknowledging that the thought and that judgment is not a fact, it's a
Hmm.
so you're saying, I'm having a thought of judgment right now. I'm having a thought of being self-critical
Yeah.
to acknowledge it and let it go, not holding on to that because that's not mindfulness.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. That leads perfectly into our next question, which is how do mindfulness skills such
Mhm.
as observing, describing, and participating contribute to emotional regulation and distress tolerance?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So, with the observe, describe, and participate, those are our how skills. So,
Mhm.
essentially, what that means is like in DBT, the observe, describe, and participate. This is how you do mindfulness practices. And with those three skills, you do them one at a time. And when you are able to do this one at a time, guess what? It can increase your ability to observe your experiences, describe them with clarity, and then engage in life's activities with your whole heart, right? And so when you're able to do these three things, that reduces your emotional intensity because you're responding more skillfully. So what is observe, describe, and participate, right? So observe, this is the first skill that you would do. And it involves being fully present in the moment and noticing again what's happening around you without judgment. It's about paying attention internally, your internal experience. What are my thoughts? What
Yeah.
are my feelings? What are my sensations? And also observing your environment. And so this is really crucial because this helps you to slow things down, right? Slow things down, gather data, gather information before you make a reaction, before you make a behavior, before you respond. So this really
Mm.
does slow things down and it cultivates awareness. So you can again be in the present moment and assess, pull in
Yeah.
data, right? So an
Yeah.
example like of this might be like, let's say you're really stressed. You're really stressed at work. And instead of getting caught up with your thoughts of like rushing through tasks and like sending out emails and getting things done, you really want to just observe like what's coming up for you right now. Damn, I'm noticing that I'm feeling really hot right now. I'm noticing tightness in my chest. I'm noticing butterflies in my stomach. I'm noticing my shoulders are kind of tense, right? And then you want to observe the surrounding. To that could be a really useful skill to help regulate your emotions. So
Yeah.
instead of tapping into the stress, maybe you're observing your surroundings. Maybe you're observing how the pressure you feel when you're sitting on your seat. Maybe that is doing some pace breathing, right? So that's the first skill. The
Yeah.
second skill that you would want to use is describe. So after you observe, right, after you gather information by looking around, by observing what's coming up inside of you, you then describe it. This is where you start putting words and labels to your experiences, again, without adding judgment. This is ungluing interpretation. It's about labeling what you just observed using objective and factual language. So, what do I mean by that? Um, there's an example that I hear a lot like, I'm a loser or I'm anxious.
Mm,
right? So that thought is not a fact. It's a belief, it's an interpretation,
hmm
um, thought, but you can't prove that, right? You can only prove a fact by your senses. So
hmm
if you can smell it, if you can see it, if you can hear it, touch it, and whatnot, that would be a fact. But you can't prove the fact that you're anxious or that you're actually stupid, right?
Gotcha.
So by
Yeah.
describing your experiences, you create like a distance. You create a distance from them, which can reduce the intensity and help you respond more skillfully.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
these skills are just like such Swiss Army knives, that
Yeah.
just so applicable across many spectrums.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how does dialectical behavior therapy employ these interventions and these skills differently than say like a CBT purely or like an ACT therapy?
Yeah, I think that I want to. So DBT is a third wave. So a cousin of CBT.
Hmm
Um, One thing that I will say is that I think with CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, there is some observation. There is some description involved. I think what DBT is different is that we're acknowledging it. We're not changing the thought. Whereas with CBT,
hmm
you have that thought, you're modifying that thought, you're challenging that thought, which can be helpful, but sometimes that can feel really, really invalidating. So,
mm
if a client has gone through a traumatic incident and they say, like, I can never trust anyone, CBT would challenge that thought. They would put that thought on trial, per se, and try to argue that that thought is not accurate. And
mm
that can be really, really invalidating because that person may
Yeah.
have gone through a really traumatic experience. Whereas DBT, again, you're observing that thought, you're describing that that is a thought that you're having right now, and then you're
Yeah.
also acknowledging it without changing it. You're just saying, I'm having that thought right now. I'm having a feeling of sadness. I'm
Yeah.
having that I can't trust anyone right now. I'm
Yeah.
having a thought that I'm unlovable,
Yeah.
or just saying I'm unlovable. So that's like the main difference between DBT and CBT. But the describe skill in DBT is really, really useful because it helps you get more factual and, again, take a step back from our judgments and our interpretation. So we're not judging our emotions, or we're not judging our thoughts when we have those thoughts like, oh, I'm feeling anxious right now. I'm feeling I'm having a thought that I might get fired. Instead of saying, oh, that's a stupid thought, instead of
mm
judging the thought, we're saying, I'm having the thought that I'm getting fired. I'm having a thought that I'm catastrophizing. I'm having the feeling of feeling anxious. So when we are able to describe that in a factual manner, we're then able to, again, take a step back and not hold on to those feelings as if it's a permanence, as if it's our identity.
Wow. Wow. And then is there any overlap with ACT therapy?
Yeah, with ACT therapy, there is an overlap. So there's one skill in ACT called cognitive diffusion, which
Mm,
DBT borrows. So it's essentially what I just described. So instead of saying like I'm unlovable, you're saying I'm having the thought that I'm unlovable. So you're separating yourself from that permanence, say, and that identity.
mm,
So cognitive diffusion, which is part of ACT, and again DBT borrows this. Again, we're taking a step back. We're saying we're being mindful of these thoughts. We're being mindful of these emotions. We're not trying to change it, because when we change it, that's invalidating, and we're
mhm.
not suppressing it, because if we suppress it, it's going to intensify. So we're acknowledging that the emotions are real. We're acknowledging that we're having the thoughts here. And when you're able to do that, you're actually able to kind of let it go, because you've seen it, you felt it, and then you move on
Yeah.
versus holding on to it and trying to change
Yeah.
or suppress it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there more data to the success and the after effects of what the DBT intervention does versus what we're talking about with ACT and then with CBT? Does that make sense?
I am sure there's probably a lot of research about it, and I have to be honest, I'm not well versed in the update.
No worries.
I've been in my DBT lane, and I just know that DBT works. And I know that with the
Yeah.
skill we do teach, like observe, describe, and participate, I've seen it play out in the therapy room. I've seen the effects in the group setting, that it does work and that it is very, very useful. Yeah,
Awesome. Awesome.
sure, there's data to support that. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. So, because this again goes right into our next question. We're not even doing this on purpose. It just keeps accidentally happening. So in what ways does mindfulness help individuals become more aware of automatic thoughts, emotions, and then
Mhm.
bodily sensations.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I've noticed is with the practice of mindfulness, I'm much more in tune with how my stomach is feeling. And instead of just saying like, "Oh, my stomach is upset," or whatever, it's, "Oh, I'm noticing tension,"
Mhm.
or I'm noticing like gas, like discomfort in
Yeah.
like the bottom left, like being specific and then being like, and then doing what you're saying, looking around and being like, "Okay, well, what am I observing? What can I describe? And now like what am I feeling?"
Yeah, so your example right there is a prime example of what mindfulness is because you're observing it and then you're describing it, right? So mindfulness again helps increase that awareness because when we are paying attention to the present moment, you can actually then notice what's occurring. You can notice
Mm,
triggers arising sensations that's arising in your stomach or throughout your body.
yeah.
So example of this could be, let's say there's a individual individual is aware of their thought. They have the thought like, I don't want to be here anymore
Hmm.
during a stressful situation. And so mindfulness would then be like, I'm noticing that they have that thought during a stressful situation, and then noticing their tight
Mm,
chest, right? Or maybe their racing heart is increasing, right? So it's really being mindful of what's occurring inside of the body.
yeah.
And once you're able to catch and notice, like, wow, there's pressure in my body. I'm noticing that it's difficult for me to breathe. You are then able to use skills. You're able then to be more effective on how you want to proceed with whatever you're doing. So maybe that means taking a step back, like literally stop. Maybe that means using breathing techniques to help
Mm,
you stay calm. And so that awareness component is super, super important because if you're not aware, if you're not mindful of what's arising in your body or the
yeah.
thoughts that are occurring,
Yeah.
you won't be able to regulate your emotions. You won't be able to know when to use skills and you
Yeah.
won't know when to intervene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you say intervene, like why is that timing so important?
Yeah, it's important because the sooner you catch it, the sooner you catch the discomfort feelings in your stomach or the pressure in your back if you're stressed out. That's a indicator to go like, why am I feeling pressure in my back? Why is my heart rate increasing? Why do I feel hot? It
Yeah.
gives you an opportunity to pause, right, and assess and tap into that curiosity to then problem solve if necessary. Wow, maybe I've been feeling tension in my back and I've been having difficulty breathing when I'm at work. Wow,
Mm,
means I'm not, this is not the place that the work environment is not for me. So that can lead to problem solving.
yeah.
Maybe you leave your work, maybe this is the work that you design, committed to. So
Mm,
in this case, maybe what skills can you use? That
mm,
may be doing some stop skills, maybe some tip or pace breathing or an ice dive. So
mm,
the the stopping and being mindful is really, really important because that's when you can intervene to make the situation not get worse, to not make the emotions intensify.
No, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. And
Yeah.
so, and then this next question kind of touches on the kind of mental process that we're talking about here. So, like, how does the practice of non-judgmental acceptance in mindfulness differ from
Mhm.
suppressing or avoiding difficult thoughts and emotions?
Yeah, I have to put a disclaimer. I was the queen before DBT. I was the queen of sweeping things under the rug, right?
Yep.
Ignoring things,
Yep.
suppressing things, and it does not work. It's not useful. So, what non-judgmental acceptance and mindfulness is, again, it's acknowledging the thoughts and emotion without labeling them as good
Yeah.
or bad. Depression is bad, anxiety is bad. We're not saying that. You're accepting your experience as it is without labeling it, without judging it or rejecting the emotion, even if the emotion is painful.
Mm,
When you're able to do that, you're able to then again see reality as it is. You're not in denial. You're not saying like shit, I don't like my work's environment. You're not
yeah.
saying, oh, everything is okay and putting on a fake smile because that's ingenuine and that's not authentic, right?
Yeah.
So example of this might be like again, if you're feeling anxious, instead of thinking I shouldn't feel this way, you want to acknowledge the feeling. You want
Hmm.
to say, "I'm feeling anxious right now without trying to push it away or judge it
Yeah.
because start judging our emotions, we are then telling our brain to stop feeling that way, stop being anxious, stop doing this, stop doing that. And we need to know that our emotions have a purpose. They
Yeah.
serve a function. There's usefulness behind our emotions. And when we ignore or when we start pushing away our thoughts and our emotion, that can actually intensify the distress. So the
Mm.
example you may have heard before, it's like the beach ball example. So imagine you have a beach ball and you're holding it down under a pool,
Yeah.
right? And if I were to let go of the beach ball, what usually happens?
Just pop right back up.
Yeah, it pops back right up, right? And so the beach ball represents our emotions. The stronger we try to hold it down, the longer we try to hold it down. It's really exhausting. First of all, it's physically exhausting.
Yeah.
And when we let go of it, it intensifies. It pops
Yeah.
up even higher. And so when people say, don't cry, that is all messages of like suppress your emotion, but eventually it's going to come out. And so
Yeah.
we want to be non-judgmental towards our unwanted emotions or unwanted unhelpful thoughts. We want to greet them. We want
Yeah.
to with curiosity and be like, I see you. I see
Yeah.
you sadness. I see you anxiety. I see you depression. And then tap into that curiosity. Why do I feel that way? Why is this feeling arising within me? Once you have that, then you are then able to problem solve, make different choices to make change if that is something that you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, expression is so challenging, especially
Mhm.
given, at least in the United States, our cultural context is to suppress, to put it under
Right.
the rug, put it in the
Mhm.
closet, hide it, don't talk about it.
Right.
And now we have this epidemic of, this gendered line of males who are experiencing suicidality at this alarming
Mhm.
rate. And to me, there's a direct correlation to this culture of suppression.
Mhm.
Um, at the same time, though, to remain dialectic, I understand that the reason we have that culture is because when there have been brave moments of expression, it's been
Mhm.
met with societal judgment at like a pretty intense scale. And
Mhm.
we can talk about how intense that invalidation feels. Imagining what it would feel like without any of the skills feels unbearable, like such an unfair ask to ask people.
Right.
What do you like if in your imagination, right? Like what
Mhm.
could be a great way to kind of break that down and change the culture from one, from suppression to expression, and then two, from expression met with judgment to expression met with validation and curiosity.
Yeah, really beautiful question. I think the first step is normalizing that these emotions are real and that everyone has these emotions. Number two, if that's hard for you to do, then I would challenge you and ask you to think of how you would treat your loved ones.
Mm,
How would you treat your best friend? How would you treat your fur baby? How
yeah,
would you treat someone that you generally find love and compassion towards? How
yeah,
would you treat them if they were going through the same thing? That's
yeah,
the first to cultivate self-compassion and self-validation.
hmm,
Um, it's hard for you to normalize that emotions are normal,
yeah,
right? And so I would say that think about what you could say to a loved one, to your best friend, to a family member, if they were going through something similar to you, and then see the difference of how you speak to them, how you respond to them versus how you talk about yourself.
mm,
And then once you're able to notice a difference, that is mindfulness to be like, damn, like I'm really harsh on myself. I say a lot of critical things about myself
yeah,
and I do that with my friends or I don't do that with my boyfriend. Why do I do that with myself?
yeah,
Once
yeah,
you have that awareness, you are then able to practice mindfulness of judgment to be
yeah.
less about yourself.
So could mindfulness be taken to kind of like, I'm going to call it a positive extreme, right? And I'll use a pretty silly,
Yeah.
potent example, right? We have high, the United States has one of the highest gun sales in the
Mhm.
world. Like we have a large amount of weapons that personal citizens own, and a lot of the arguments in our country are access to weapons versus zero access to weapons, and then we kind of like break it down into, well, it's about mental health, or oh, it's about Second Amendment rights, or whatever it may be. Could mindfulness be this kind of like sneaky anecdote because Well, we don't have an issue with gun ownership. We have an issue with reckless gun ownership, mindless gun ownership. We don't have an issue with perhaps, the individuals who are seeking out that exciting
Mhm.
product. It's doing it mindlessly, doing it compulsively, and then going and being a part of a group of people who are also doing it mindlessly, compulsively. So to keep that example going, could mindfulness be like an answer to gun violence in the United States?
I think it could be, I think mindfulness can be a really useful skill with anything, but using that example, absolutely,
Yeah.
because when the purchaser, like the person who's buying the guns, I think that mindfulness could be really useful because it's like, why am I buying this?
Mm.
What is this this tool serving for me? What
Yeah.
it does it add, to my hobbies? It's something that I generally enjoy. So mindfulness can really slow that action
Yeah.
before you make that purchase, right? You're really
Yeah.
observing what you're thinking about, what you're feeling about, what's the need for this, and how can it benefit from your life or from others. And
Yeah.
then again, it really slows things down and it helps you to recognize, like, wow, is this something that I generally need? Like, am
Yeah.
I hunting for my food, or is this something that is a self-care activity, but I'm doing so in a mindful place, that it's safe, that I'm not and, it's regulated. So
Yeah.
really, mindfulness can again help people make more thoughtfully decisions. Can be very, very useful in
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. And I'm realizing that it kind of just blends into a lot of different areas because
Mhm.
if you even want to go to our workplace environments, right? Like we are very work-based culture,
Right.
how many hours can you work to produce X amount of dollars when we
Mhm.
have data, right, that shows sometimes the most mindful 4 hours will outweigh the most mindless 8 hours,
Yeah.
in a given day.
Yes.
So like, you're in a work environment where mindfulness is prioritized. Do you feel the difference based on other places you've worked at in your life?
100%. I mean, I've been unfortunate that I've been in mental health for quite some time. So I'm probably like immune to the mindfulness. I just think it's second nature.
Yeah, yeah,
And I hear from my family and friends that they don't have that environment of mindfulness where
yeah,
everything is pressured. So they might skip a meal during lunch. They might skip their lunch to get their work done, or
yeah,
they might say things that are their coworkers might say things that might be a little bit abrasive, that might come off as judgmental, without being mindful of how that might be taken as or as interpreted as. So
yeah,
um, I think I've again been fortunate. I've been in the field that a lot of the clinicians are really mindful towards each other, and we're also mindful towards our needs and what we want and what we think and what we could benefit from. But
yeah.
it's not like that across the setting, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, and since it isn't universal, right? Like since no, everybody's not working in DBT or
Uh-huh.
mental health to the
Yeah,
capacity that you're talking about. Wouldn't
yeah.
that be great though? Wow.
But it's,
Um,
it's yeah.
so then how can we discuss the role of mindfulness to cultivate self-compassion and then limit self-criticism? Because if we're in these work environments where no, it's not the norm, we're going to be impacted by by the thoughts,
Mhm.
actions, and feelings of those around us. How do I use mindfulness to cultivate self-compassion in those moments, and then kind of rebuff or be like, Teflon to the
Yeah.
criticisms that come?
Yeah, I love that. So mindfulness really does encourage for the individual to be more kind and understanding
Mm,
towards yourself.
mhm,
So for being non-judgmental, that is a key component, right? That's the key component, key component of mindfulness. So in order to cultivate the self-compassion, you first need to be aware of how you're speaking to yourself.
mm,
Mindfulness, that's the awareness. And I have to say, sometimes we are our worst critics.
yeah,
So really being able to catch the thoughts, the inner dialogue that you're saying to yourself. Is it judgmental? Is it self-critical?
yeah,
Is it shitting on yourself? Like, I should be doing better. I should be working out right now. I should be a better mother. I should be a better father. Like, how is your
yeah,
inner dialogue? And then once you're able to catch that inner dialogue, you then are able to label it and you're able to describe it, right? Which is another mindfulness skill. I just had a thought that I was shitting on myself. I
yeah,
just had a thought that I was being self-critical about
yeah,
myself. And then once you're able to observe and describe, that's when you're able to participate. So that's when you're able to say, Do I want to participate by holding on to this thought?
Yeah.
And if you do that, most likely you're probably going to feel really shitty and you're probably not going to cultivate self compassion. It's going to do the
Yeah.
opposite. You're going to
Yeah.
feel worse. You're going to feel critical and you probably will feel just like self loathe, right? It's
Yeah.
not going to cultivate self love. So that's the first step is being aware of how you're speaking to yourself, then describing it, and then decide whether you want to participate in holding on to that thought or participate in using the skills.
Yeah.
So one skill that I really like is one called the loving kindness practice. Maybe you've heard about it before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this one because again, you don't have to believe the mantras, you don't have to believe the phrase, and as long as you practice it, what you practice will go stronger. So for me, when I first started this practice, I was like, this sounds, I had judgments towards it. I was like, this sounds really cheesy.
Yeah.
I highly
Totally.
doubt this won't work. But essentially, what it is like you place your hand over your heart and you come up with three mantras to find inner peace and compassion. So you could say something along the lines like, may I find peace. May I find love. May I find healing. May I find joy. You see that, throughout the day or, throughout the week, that can really help cultivate self-compassion and self-love and
Yeah.
reduce self-criticism.
That's amazing. And so
Yeah.
since we can't control obviously the interactions of others, how does mindfulness help us with our interpersonal interactions with other people?
Uh, that's a really good question. And so that's the thing about interactions with others. We have to use a lot of skills. One of them being acceptance that we don't have the ability to wave a wand and change our loved ones or those
Yeah.
we interact. We can't change their behavior. So it's then how can we then monitor what we say or how we feel in those interactions? And so
Yeah.
again, mindfulness can be really, really useful because it helps you be mindful of what you're thinking in the situation or the conversation or even in the relationship. And when you're having those thoughts, you're also, again, you're trying to pivot yourself into the moment, right? So try not to be distracted when a loved one's talking to you. So when you're
Yeah.
mindful, that actually improves your ability to practice an active listening, to
Yeah.
maintain eye contact, to be present in the conversation. And when you're able to do that, guess what? Your loved ones, your family, your friends, they feel heard, they feel supported, and that can benefit, that can improve the relationship or friendship. It also can help, mindfulness can also help with noticing what's coming up for you,
Yeah.
right? So and if you're, let's say a loved one said something that's really abrasive or hurtful, emotion mind might say like, F this person, I want to give them a piece of my mind.
Yeah.
Mindfulness, because that practice is encouraging you to stay in the moment. You're noticing like I'm having the urge to lash out, I'm having the urge to yell, and it's not effective. How can I bring myself into the moment? So that's going to reduce miscommunication. It can reduce arguments when you're mindful
Yeah.
with your loved ones.
Yeah. So I mean, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's being mindful is actually going to be a great tool for validating the other person so that they can then understand that you're listening. And then you can continue like being mindful and do it over and over and over and over and over and over again.
Yes. Yes.
That makes sense. So would you say a lot of interpersonal conflict is from people not being mindful of the other person?
I think so. I think so. I think that, and I don't blame individuals who might have that type of behavior at that moment.
Yeah,
I think that we are human beings that we want to um, like. I wouldn't say that we're selfish, but we want our needs to be met. And so
totally.
when we're interacting with someone else and we don't feel heard, we don't feel seen, we want to say it. We want to be a little bit emotional. We want to kind of advocate for ourselves, right?
Yeah,
Or we might just ignore our needs and be a people pleaser, which I've
yeah,
been there and done that too.
yeah,
And so with mindfulness, it really does help you navigate what you want in a conversation or in a relationship. Because
yeah,
again, being in tune, you're more in tune with your thoughts, your feelings, your needs, and your sensations,
yeah,
and you're also being mindful of the other person. And again, you're not being judgmental, you're being descriptive, right? So if a loved one is like looking at you, they're like frowning,
yeah,
it's typical that someone might be like, oh, this person hates me, they don't
yeah,
like me, they're mad at me, right?
yeah, yeah.
That's an interpretation. You have interpretation, right? But with
Right.
mindfulness, we're refraining from that and we're saying, if someone is frowning at you like this, you're gonna say with mindfulness, like, I'm observing and I'm describing that Cindy's eyebrows are furrowed. Her eyes are a little bit squinted right now. She's not smiling. That's more factual
Yeah.
versus saying Cindy's thinking a lot of dirty things about me. Cindy is thinking Cindy doesn't like me,
Yeah.
right? And when we're mindful and we're observing and describing, that really helps us to obtain accurate data, which reduces assumptions, which then reduces interpersonal conflicts.
Can we practice that before being in front of a person? Like, can we mindfully do that, like, in the mirror, like, with ourselves or something?
Of course, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Because our behaviors happen so quickly
Yeah.
and sometimes unconsciously, right? But certain emotions will cue certain muscles in
Sure.
our facial area, right? And so
Yeah.
being mindful of that when you're angry, what does that look like for you? What do you feel when you're angry internally and also behaviorally?
Yeah.
For me, when I'm anxious, I notice that I tap my hands a lot, right? Or when I'm
Yeah.
angry, I that my fists are clenched. Or
Yeah.
when I'm afraid, I do a lot of eye rolling, or I just go like I kind of give the face like this, right? And so just
Yeah.
being mindful of your own expressions when you are feeling a certain emotions, and that can be really helpful for you to but just be a little bit more aware of how
Yeah.
you yourself and how others may present themselves too.
Totally, totally. And what's coming up for me too is this idea of taking responsibility for your emotions and how you are responding to others, and the challenge that that might pose if you grew up in an environment where responsibility was almost like weaponized.
Mm,
Like take responsibility for your actions and you should feel bad because you didn't do it either effectively or correctly or
oh,
whatever the
oh,
judgment may be.
yeah.
So how for people who grew up, so like someone like myself who grew up in a pretty religious environment where instead of responsibility, accountability was the word that was used more often than not. And when you felt someone like myself who would feel dysregulated and like, oh my gosh, I genuinely feel like I have zero control over these thoughts, emotions, and actions, and so then you start judging those thoughts, and then you don't be, you lose your ability to be mindful in an interpersonal moment. What would kind of your advice be for those, I'm going to say like young adults to adolescents who are in the environment of, we'll say, high control, where their feelings are pretty invalidated? And how do they bridge that gap of responsibility versus like kind of toxic accountability?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is definitely validate yourself. So,
Mm.
really notice what's coming up for you when you are in an over controlled environment, when you are doing the best that you can and you still are being mistreated. And again, recognizing that the environment might not have the skills that you have, and
Yeah,
recognizing that the environment, they might be doing the best that they can, and they too need to try harder, right? And then also recognizing that unfortunately, with radical acceptance, you cannot change your environment, you can't change those around you, and you
yeah,
can't change your behavior. So,
yeah,
going back to the mindfulness component, it's really validating yourself, saying like,
yeah,
"Wow," noticing that the feeling that's coming up for you. Well, I'm feeling really heartbroken right now because I just told my mom I needed something, and she said that she said something really hurtful. So
yeah,
mindfulness would be like, wow, acknowledging what's coming up for you in that moment, that unpleasant emotion, and say, it makes sense why I feel heartbroken. It makes
yeah,
sense feel judged. It makes sense why I feel invalidated because my environment just said X, Y, and Z to me. And
totally.
yeah, so with mindfulness, you really are able to tap into that validation and then speak a little bit more kind to yourself and recognize it makes sense why you feel a certain way, and to not judge it, not judge yourself for having these unwanted strong emotions,
Yeah,
because it came out of something. It's not like you pulled it out of thin air. It
yeah,
came from a prompting event. Something triggered it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Well, we're reaching the end of our questions here, and we've just it's so lovely, Cindy. Just lovely, lovely, lovely every single time.
I cannot
Uh,
wait.
we've talked about how to integrate these into our daily routines, promote self-wellness. I'm going to skip that one. But the 10th question, I would love to hear your response for because it says, can you share examples of how mindfulness has personally impacted you, your life, or the lives of other in DBT therapy in your experience?
Yeah, yeah. A few months ago, I did my first podcast. I think this was even before I jumped on your
What?
podcast. Yeah, this is like my first one, and it
Heck yeah.
was live. okay. I had no experience before. And the first time I heard the playback, I was really harsh on myself. I said, "Oh, that's my voice. That's how my voice sounds like." I had a lot of judgments. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I didn't like how I said a lot. I didn't like how I said like frequently." And then mindfulness kicked in. I was like, wait a minute. I am being really critical about myself. I'm having these critical thoughts.
Yeah.
Mindfulness helped me to pause and literally stop the unhelpful thoughts where I can use my skills to manage the unwanted emotions, whether that be the embarrassment, whether that be disgust. So
Yeah.
with mindfulness, I was like, wait, I just said something really critical about myself. That was a harsh comment. That was a harsh thought. Let me
Yeah.
stop. Let me check the facts. So then I said, okay, like this was my first podcast. I didn't have any experience before. It was time limited, it wasn't cut. And so of course there's going to be imperfections in it because it wasn't edited, right? There was no nothing was being cut. So I was
Yeah.
able to the facts, and that helps me to be like, oh yeah, like of course it helped me validate my experience, but make me realize that I was too harsh on myself, too
Yeah.
harsh on myself. And then I used other skills, like again, what would I say to my best friend? I
Yeah.
would her hype woman. I would be like, girl, that was your first podcast. You did amazing. Like it
Yeah.
was your time. Like give yourself some credit, right? So mindfulness really helps me again pause, stop, gather the data, gather that I was being really mean to myself, gather that I was being so harsh on myself, and then also describe what that felt like, and then go like, wait a minute, that's not what it is, and for me to use skills to regulate my emotions. But with my clients or with other people in DBT, I've seen mindfulness be so effective, so useful in their life. So I've had a client who um, is diagnosed or experiences borderline personality traits. And so their relationship with their family has been pretty dysfunctional,
Yeah.
given the fact that their environment is chronically invalidating them, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of invalidation, a lot of judgment towards them, where this client starts to mimic or mirror the same behavior. They start engaging in a lot of negative self-talk or a lot of
Mhm.
judgment, listening or thinking. And
Yeah.
so mindfulness has helped them to also slow things down, to pause, to gather the facts, to be like, wow, I just said something that like I should get better. I shouldn't do this. Like
Yeah.
mindfulness really helped them notice like the dialogue that they were saying to themselves, and to stop and catch it, and then describe it factually. Like these thoughts are not real, they're a thought, but it doesn't
Yeah.
mean that. So
Yeah.
mindfulness has been really moving in more simple day-to-day experiences, but also with more meaningful powerful experiences too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Incredible. Incredible. Thank you for that, Cindy. And thank you for coming on to talk about. I feel like we just got like a very rich meal about mindfulness. Hopefully, people will be able to take what they can. And if not, leave a question in the comments. Who knows? Maybe Cindy will see it. She'll answer them. If not, and if you need to reach out to her, she is at the DBT Center of Orange County, which the information for that will be found in the link below. Cindy, as always, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We
Appreciate
will,
your time.
we will see you on the next one.
Yes.